I'm from Cumbria originally, a small town on the coast called Haverig, and I always wanted to play sport as a kid. It was more sort of cricket in the summer and football all the rest of the time. At school I played the generic netball rounders, hockey, football, but there was no rugby whatsoever, and I didn't really know what it was, to be fair. And that was just going through school, and it wasn't until I went to college in Barrow-in-Furness that I was introduced to Rugby League. So I was sort of 17 at the time, and then just went along to Barrow Ladies Rugby Club, and that's where it kind of started. I think all the time when I was playing netball and hockey, I was always getting pulled for being too rough and too aggressive, and and I just thought, oh well, that's just me, take it or leave it. But then when you get introduced to rugby, you can kind of do that on a bigger scale and actually get rewarded for it. So yeah, it was just the aggression and the contact side of it that I really enjoyed. But I remember my first game, and they said, oh, you're going to be a back. And for me, because I'd always played football, I thought, oh, that means defence. So I was a bit gutted that I was being a back. I didn't realise that meant, what it means in rugby. But after the first game, we played Sheffield away, I remember. So that was a bit of a trek, sort of 3 hours from Cumbria to play 80 minutes of rugby. But I just remember it being amazing, and I thought, oh, I think I found my sport now. So I was living in Cumbria, going to university in Lancaster, and then training for England under-21s, which then developed into the Great Britain squad in Leeds way. So I was kind of doing this triangle constantly, and it was just making a decision, what am I going to do? So that's why I ended up moving to Yorkshire, and I started off in Halifax, living there and commuting to Lancaster for university, and then went on tour with Great Britain in 2003 to the World Cup in New Zealand, and after that came back and signed for Wakefield Townville Panthers, which was just based at Townville Tigers just down the road, and that's how I ended up in Castleford. I think all the way through school, sport was all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to be a PE teacher, really looked up to my PE teacher at school. There was nothing else really that I wanted to do, and I always felt like I wanted to, maybe go down a more of elite pathway. I did like county level hockey and netball, but if you didn't go to the right school or whatever, it was a little bit cliquey. So getting involved with the rugby and then seeing this clear pathway was really exciting. When we went to New Zealand the first time, they did the anthem. My mum and dad lived in Spain, and this was before mobile phones. I sound really old. They went to like a phone box in Spain, and I put my like the little phone that I had, the little Nokia in my shorts, so they could hear the anthem. So they're there, and afterwards, my mum rang me back and said that she was buzzing about it. So there's a lot of emotions family wise, and not just for yourself. I think it's a bit surreal, isn't it, when you do something like that for the first time. I'd always been sort of an avid watcher of every sport, whether it was England football or Olympics or anything, and you hear the anthems all the time, but you never think that actually you'll be stood there one day listening to an anthem. So yeah, it was class. It was something that not many people get to do, so you just got to embrace it, because you don't know how many times you're going to be able to hear it. Luckily for me, I had a long career, but you've just got to embrace every time, I guess.
So were you worried your phone might fall out?
Yeah, it did actually as we were walking out. So yeah, it was a bit. I told one of the older lasses, I said, I've promised my mum that I'll put my mobile phone in my shorts, and they were just like, oh, I can't believe you're doing that. Looking back now, if one of my players did that, they took a mobile phone on the pitch, I'd go mental. But at that point, being really young, you don't understand the prep for a game and all this sort of stuff. So it was just a bit, I don't know, just a bit odd. That was Brenda Durbeck coaching them. She went out and played in 2003, and there was a few Wakefield girls there that I got on with. And it was renowned as having the best setup. So if I was going to move to Yorkshire, I was living in Castleford, so I thought I may as well play for the nearest team, which was Wakefield. I just liked that there was rugby everywhere. Everybody had cast shirts on. Everybody wanted to speak about rugby, and there was just so many local clubs. So on a weekend when I wasn't teaching, there was so much rugby around. Whereas where I was from in Cumbria, it wasn't as much. So I enjoyed that, and then obviously enjoyed starting to go and watch Cast Tigers. So watching a good standard of rugby that was just on my doorstep. So yeah, it was pretty exciting, to be fair. Not many people might say that about Castleford, but when you're coming from the sticks where it's just sheep and sand, and suddenly you've got, you know, an escape had just been built at the time as well. So Nando's was an absolute revelation. Yeah, it was great. I loved it. So I was doing teacher training in Lancaster, so a couple of my first placements were up in Cumbria. But then for my final one in my third year, I managed to get King's School in Pontefract. So that was fantastic because now everything, you know, my final year was on my doorstep. And it meant I could focus a bit more on training and doing well with my rugby. And then managed to get a job at Nottingham High School, which is now De Lacy. And I've been there ever since. So yeah, I obviously enjoy it, else I would have moved on. But no, it was a good move. I can't imagine moving back to Cumbria now, to be fair. I played for Wakefield for a number of years, and then approaching up to the 2013 World Cup, I'd obviously enjoyed my time with Wakefield, which then turned into Featherstone Rovers, actually. You know, we'd had the same set of girls going all the way through, but I just felt that the game itself needed professionalising a little bit. You know, women's football was taking off, women's rugby was taking off, and I felt that I had a lot of ideas of how I could go into a club and change it, and, you know, just little things to make women's rugby seem more appealing and more professional. So I got offered to go and start up a team at Normanton Knights, and I did that for a couple of seasons, and really enjoyed sort of cutting my coaching teeth there. We got some really good raw local girls, and a lot of whom are still playing now, which I'm proud of. And then off the back of that, managed to get a coaching job doing England students. So kind of where I'd started, then I was coaching them, and took them to Budapest to play against the Hungarian students. And that was just a fantastic tour, to actually not just be a player, but to then be leading it and leading all these girls and seeing them having a fantastic time and enjoying the experience. I came back from that and had some real big ideas of what I wanted to do. A lot of those girls at England students played for the sort of lower division teams. None of them were with the big sort of Bradford, Featherstone, Thatoif, and they all wanted to club together and make a team. So one of them, Georgie, who was a Cass lass from Cass Academy, she went to the bosses at Cass and said, can we have a women's team? And then, of course, mine with the next phone call, will you coach it? So, yeah, at first I was a little bit reluctant because I knew what the commitment would be like. But then if you're going to do something, you do it 100%. And I wrote a quite in-depth 3-year plan of what we wanted to do at Cass. We're in our 3rd year now. And it's gone really well. It started off a little bit ropey. We had to get players involved, interested. You know, the mentality at Cass was pretty sexist at times, where, you know, women playing rugby, do they play in skirts? Is it the same rules? And do they actually run with the ball? And is there tackling? You know, all these stupid questions that we had to overcome at first, which in this day and age you can't believe, but genuinely that's what it was like. And now 2.5 years later, you know, we're getting over 1,000 through the turnstiles. The girls are, you know, genuine role models for the local girls. And yeah, I suppose in everything I've done, I am proud of my career. But this is something that I'm more proud of, I think, in terms of gains in women's sport, in equality, in professionalising the game. This is maybe what all those years of playing and sussing it out maybe are coming to the forefront. I think, I don't know, maybe just my opinion, Castleford were very, especially on the rugby side, really male dominated. There'd always been little girls teams that did well at Cass Panthers, and Cutsites coming through now with the girls teams. But in terms of on a big scale, I mean, there's no hockey teams for girls, netball, football, there's White Rose Ladies, which has a bit. But in terms of women's rugby or women's sport being at the forefront, there wasn't a lot going on. And I think this year in particular, it's what our girls have done is revolutionised that, and through the backing of Cass now, the Tigers management, they're pushing us forward as much as we're pushing ourselves, and that's, I feel like we've got a bit of a momentum now. We're rolling, we're playing well, we're getting lots of fans in, and people are saying good stuff about how women play sport, and that for me is really important, whether it's rugby or anything. In our first year as Cass, the first ever year that we were established, we were like a separate entity to the men, so we never played at the Jungle. We played some games at Cass Rugby Union, some at De Lacy Academy, my school, just because, you know, they were a community venue. And I knew that we had to kind of get our stripes with CAS. You know, we had to prove we were worthy of being a full part of what CAS Tigers do. Second year we did a little bit better. We got to the Challenge Cup final and people started to take notice. But for me, a massive part of what we were doing was the social media drive, the professionalising everything we were doing. So they had the names on the back of the shirts, they had the same shirts as the men. We started playing a bit more at the Jungle. There was, every player had a sponsor, and it was really taking off. So in the third year, off the back of what we'd done, getting to the Challenge Cup final and everything we'd done off the field of trying to raise the profile and improving all our social media stuff, the girls that I'd started with from the students had been sort of 16, 17, 18. They were now getting, into their early 20s. So they were becoming more able on the field. And then through everything we're doing off the field, we attracted a couple of other older, more mature players who would, had experience at a good level. So that came in. Having a group of kids is fantastic and they're so enthusiastic. But when it comes to big games on a big stage like Challenge Cup finals, if you haven't got a leader in that group, it's difficult. So what I needed to do was recruit some players who, might have those leadership skills, and through recruiting Rhiannon, Marshall Schöner from Bradford and Claire Garner, that just gave us a bit more balance within the team. I think that's why this year we're really kicking on. The managers at CAS at first were a little bit sceptical about what a women's team would actually bring to the club, but I think over the past couple of years especially, they've seen that it's mutually beneficial for them to have a women's team. They enjoy coming and watching us, they say, as much as they enjoy watching the men, and that's something for us to be proud of, I guess. Down at the ground we're getting a lot of male supporters, as many as female supporters, and a lot of them again pull me at the end and say, wow, I really enjoyed that. It's slightly different to the men's, but the girls are tough, and they're training hard, you can tell, and that's testament to what we've done down there. And to convert some of these sort of male dominated CAS fans to come and watch women is brilliant. It's not just CAS that's done a great job. The RFL, through the launch of the Women's Super League, has really pushed things forward. They've given it a lot of profile. They've done a lot of social media and a lot of publicity around it, which is turning heads as much as what we're doing as a club. So you'll find now that clubs are sort of inundated with players, whereas 5-10 years ago they might have been scratching around trying to get 17 players, but now they've got big squads, and girls are in a pathway to go up through a 19s to get to a Women's Super League. But on the back of that as well, you have got a lot of other clubs popping up wanting to have a women's team. So Hull KR, Widnes, Keighley, Halifax. There's loads and loads that are coming to the forefront and seeing the benefit of having a women's team. The girls that I teach at school, the only extracurricular sport that they'll do away from school is, I suppose, rugby, because there are a few clubs. You've got Cutsite, Fryston, Normanton, Kippocks. So there's a few that will go down that pathway, but the rest aren't bothered. But they are CAS fans. And at the beginning of this season, it was quite funny, really. One of my new year sevens came up, and I didn't know her name. And I said, what did you do at the weekend? And she went, I went to watch CAS Tigers. And me thinking it was the men, I was like, who's your favourite player? And she went, Courtney Poynton and Lacey Owen. And I was like, you came to watch the women? She was like, yeah. She didn't even know that I coached them or anything. She was just telling me that she'd been and watched the women and they were ace, and she went speaking to one of them at the end, and such scored the tries. And I thought, wow, we're on a bit of a turning point now. And this isn't even in Castleford. And then now at the games down at the Jungle, you'll get a big group of girls, at the end, stood by the sides, and all my girls go and chat to them and have selfies with them. And it's just nice to see this genuine role model of females within the community. They're enjoying the attention that they get from the young uns, and at the same time I think the young uns are enjoying aspiring to something that's not the men. Coaching is what I'm passionate about. Yeah, I love it at De Lacy, and I'm head of PE there, and I've got a really good work-life balance in that it's Monday to Friday, 8 till 5, and then I get to do my coaching on an evening and on a weekend. For me, a job in rugby would be ideal. I'd love to work at CAS with the women's full-time. There has been in different clubs full-time job coming up for the women's side. CAS probably aren't as affluent as some of these other clubs, but at the moment, you know, it's a voluntary post that I've got. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and as long as I'm involved and enjoying what I'm doing, it's happy days. In 10 years, well, England need to be winning World Cups for starters. I'd like to see a lot of our players, or not a lot of them, but I'd like to see some of our players in the NRL, you know, doing similar to what the boys are doing over there. And I'd like to see our competition really strong in terms of a lot of teams competing, because at the moment there's 8 teams, but there's probably 4 or 5 at the top that are really competitive and the others maybe not so. So I think to really get strength in depth, there needs to be sort of 6 or 8 really strong teams, similar to in the women's rugby and women's rugby union and football. But yeah, I just think it's on the right path. The trajectory is going in the right direction. There's loads of girls coming through. There's loads of opportunities, and if CAS can be a small part of that, then the better for it, I guess.